The message arrived on a Tuesday. It came not as the scientists had expected. No radio signals, no mathematical sequences beamed from distant stars. Instead, a sleek vessel simply appeared in Earth's orbit, its hull reflecting sunlight like polished obsidian. Within hours, every government on Earth received the same transmission, an invitation. The Galactic Council, a federation of 23 spacefaring species, requested Earth's presence at an evaluation summit. Humanity would be assessed for potential membership. James Miller watched the news from his apartment in Washington, D.C., his coffee growing cold. At 45, the retired Marine colonel had seen enough combat to know when something seemed too good to be true. 3 days later, Miller found himself aboard a military transport plane headed to the United Nations. His phone buzzed with a text from General Hayes. "They specifically asked for you." The UN Secretary General met him at the door. "Colonel Miller, thank you for coming. The aliens were quite insistent that our delegation include military representation. Your record in tactical innovation made you our first choice." Miller nodded. "Any idea why they want a soldier at a diplomatic meeting?" "They said something about complete cultural assessment. I think they want to understand all aspects of humanity." The meeting room buzzed with activity, diplomats, scientists, and cultural experts all preparing for humanity's first official contact. Miller stood alone by the window, watching the alien shuttle descend toward the landing pad. The council representatives were a study in diversity. The leader, who called himself Nax, had blue-tinted skin and eyes that seemed to change color. His companion Trell was reptilian, with scales that shimmered green and gold. The third, Vosh, floated above the ground on what looked like a cloud of light. "We welcome Earth's representatives," Nax said, his voice melodious. "The Council has observed your species for some time. Your rapid technological advancement is notable." The meeting progressed smoothly until Miller was asked to present on human defense capabilities. "Our global military forces employ a variety of weapon systems," Miller explained, displaying images of Earth's arsenals, from conventional firearms to guided missile systems. Trell made a sound like stones clicking together. Laughter, Miller realized. "You still use chemical propellants to launch metal projectiles?" Trell asked, not bothering to hide his amusement. "How quaint." Miller kept his expression neutral. "These primitive systems have proven effective for our needs." Nax waved a six-fingered hand. "No offense intended, Colonel. It's just that most species abandon such weapons once they discover directed energy technology." "We have laser systems in development," Miller offered. "Yet you cling to these." "Guns," Vosh observed, the light beneath him pulsing. "Most inefficient. Our civilizations use plasma and particle beam technology. Clean, precise, and far more advanced." Miller studied the three aliens. "May I ask about Council defensive capabilities?" "The Council maintains a peacekeeping fleet," Nax explained. "Though we rarely need it. Most conflicts are resolved diplomatically." "And your weapons?" Nax gestured, and a hologram appeared showing sleek ships firing beams of brilliant energy. Energy weapons that can target with microscopic precision. Shields that can deflect anything your world could possibly produce. The implied superiority was clear. Miller had seen this before, in the eyes of enemies who underestimated American forces, often fatally. "Impressive," Miller said simply. As the meeting concluded, the aliens extended their formal invitation. Earth would send representatives to the Galactic Council headquarters for further evaluation. Walking out, the Secretary General seemed elated. "This is humanity's greatest moment." Miller wasn't so sure. He had noticed something in the aliens' demeanor, not malice, but something perhaps more dangerous. Dismissiveness. They viewed humans as primitives, barely worth serious consideration. He gazed up at the stars, now knowing what lurked among them. "They're laughing at us," he murmured to himself. "Let's hope they never have reason to stop." 3 weeks after the initial contact, a Council observation team arrived on Earth. Their mission was simple: Evaluate human civilization in its natural environment. Miller watched the alien shuttle land at the military testing range in Nevada. The hot desert air shimmered above the tarmac as 5 council representatives emerged. Trell, the reptilian strategist who had mocked human weapons, led the group. "Colonel Miller," Trell said, extending a scaled hand. "We meet again. I look forward to this educational experience." Miller shook the alien's hand, noting its unusual coolness. "We've prepared demonstrations of various Earth defense systems as requested." General Hayes stood nearby with several other high-ranking officers. The president had been clear: show cooperation, but reveal only what was necessary. Earth's most advanced technologies would remain classified. "This way," Miller gestured toward the viewing platform. The first demonstration showcased standard infantry weapons. A team of soldiers moved through an urban combat simulation, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. Their rifles cracked in the dry air, bullets tearing through target boards. Vosh, hovering slightly above the ground, made a sound like wind chimes, their version of a chuckle. Such noise and smoke for so little effect. How do your soldiers communicate through such chaos? "We adapt," Miller replied simply. Next came demonstrations of artillery, tanks, and finally, air power. F-35 fighters screamed overhead, dropping precision munitions on distant targets. The explosions sent dust clouds billowing upward. Trell watched with narrowed eyes. "Curious. You rely on explosive force and fragmentation rather than precision energy delivery. Different approaches to the same problem," Miller said. The tallest alien, named Crow, spoke for the first time. "Your weapons are brutally inefficient. They tear and burn flesh rather than cleanly neutralizing targets." Miller felt a chill despite the desert heat. War is rarely clean, in our experience. During lunch, Trell questioned Miller directly. "Your species seems fixated on ballistic technology. Why have you not advanced further?" Miller considered his response carefully. Energy weapons require enormous power sources and have limitations in certain environments. Bullets work in vacuum, underwater, in electromagnetic storms, almost anywhere. Primitive reliability over elegant advancement, Trell said, his tone making it sound like an insult. Later that afternoon, the aliens requested to see human combat tactics. A special forces team demonstrated close-quarters battle techniques, moving with lethal precision through another training course. The council observers watched with expressions Miller couldn't quite read. "Your soldiers seem to expect failure," Crow noted. "They move as if always anticipating their technology will malfunction." "We call it redundancy," Miller explained. "Multiple ways to complete the mission if primary methods fail. In council forces, failure is not an option considered," Trell said proudly. "Our weapons do not jam. Our energy cells do not deplete unexpectedly." Miller smiled thinly. Must be nice. That evening, as the aliens prepared to return to their orbital vessel, Miller overheard Trell speaking to Vosh. "Their entire military doctrine is built around compensation for inferior technology," Trell said. "It's almost admirable how they've developed tactics to overcome their limitations." "They fight like cornered animals," Vosh replied. "Brutal, adaptable, but ultimately messy." The council was right to classify them as a Level 3 civilization, Trell concluded, centuries away from true advancement. Miller stepped forward, making his presence known. "Enjoying your assessment, delegates." Trell seemed unembarrassed at being overheard. "Your species has potential, Colonel. With council guidance, perhaps you'll outgrow these primitive methods." As the alien shuttle rose into the darkening sky, General Hayes joined Miller. "What's your read on them?" Hayes asked. Miller watched the ship until it became just another light among the stars. "They think they're gods with their energy weapons and shields. They've forgotten what it means to fight dirty." Hayes nodded slowly. "Let's hope they never have to remember." Miller's eyes remained fixed on the sky. Or let's hope we're there to see their faces when they do. 1 month after the Council's assessment of Earth, Miller received an urgent summons to a secure facility beneath the Pentagon. He found General Hayes staring at a live feed from the International Space Station. "It came through 10 minutes ago," Hayes said without preamble. "Direct transmission from the Galactic Council." The screen showed chaos. Council representatives hurried through gleaming corridors as alarms flashed. The blue-skinned Nax appeared, his usual composure shattered. "Attacked without warning," Nax was saying, his image occasionally breaking into static. "Colony world Eluris has fallen. Requesting immediate conference with all potential allied species." Miller leaned closer. "What happened?" "Something called the Drax," Hayes replied. "Never mentioned before in any of our talks with the Council." Within hours, Earth's leadership assembled for an emergency video conference with the Council. Nax appeared, flanked by military commanders from various alien species. Their normally immaculate appearances were disheveled. "The Drax emerged from uncharted space," Nax explained. "They destroyed our outpost on Eluris without attempting communication. When our defense fleet responded, they were eliminated with surprising efficiency." "Who are these Drax?" the President asked. "An unknown species, highly aggressive, technologically advanced." Nax's color had faded to a pale blue. "They use ships unlike any we've encountered, with defense systems that render our weapons nearly useless." Trell appeared in the frame, a gash visible across his scaled face. "Their shields absorb energy attacks. Our most powerful weapons barely register against their defenses." "How many ships do they have?" Miller asked. "We've confirmed at least 30 capital ships and numerous smaller craft," Trell answered. "They're moving toward the Proxima system now. If they take it, 3 more colonies will be exposed." The President glanced at Miller. "Colonel, your assessment?" Miller considered carefully. "It sounds like the Council's defensive doctrine has a critical weakness. If your energy weapons aren't effective, what alternatives do you have?" Trell's expression hardened. "Our technology is not the issue. We simply need to increase power output and modify frequencies." "And how long will that take?" Miller pressed. "Several weeks at minimum," Nax admitted. "Time we don't have." The President leaned forward. "The Council has assessed our weapons as primitive, but perhaps they might offer an alternative approach. Earth is prepared to offer military assistance." A moment of uncomfortable silence followed. "We appreciate Earth's offer," Nax said carefully, "but your technology would be even less effective. The distance alone makes deployment impractical." After the conference ended, Miller remained in the Situation Room with Hayes and several officials. "They're scared," Miller observed. "Their entire defense strategy has been neutralized, and they have no backup plan." "Over-specialization," Hayes nodded. "They've relied on a single approach for so long they've forgotten alternatives." Over the next 2 weeks, reports from Council space grew increasingly dire. 3 more systems fell to the Drax advance. Footage showed Council ships firing brilliant energy beams that dissipated harmlessly against the invaders' shields. Miller spent those weeks studying every scrap of information about the conflict. He noticed something the Council seemed to have overlooked. The Drax ships had specialized defenses against energy weapons, but showed conventional armor plating elsewhere. During another emergency conference, a visibly exhausted Nax reported the fall of a major Council world. "The Drax will reach the Council homeworlds within 2 weeks at their current pace," he said. "We've never faced such a threat." Miller spoke up. "Have you tried physical projectiles against their shields? Missiles? Kinetic weapons?" Trell scoffed despite his obvious fatigue. "Resorting to throwing rocks, Colonel. The Council abandoned such weapons centuries ago." "Sometimes old solutions solve new problems," Miller countered. As the meeting concluded, the President pulled Miller aside. "Prepare a contingency plan," he ordered quietly. "If they ask for our help, when they ask for our help, I want options ready." Miller nodded, already forming a plan. I'll need a carrier group and special forces teams trained for zero-G operations. You think they'll change their minds? Yes, Miller said, watching the hologram of another council ship exploding under Drax fire. They'll just have to get desperate enough first. The call came at 3 in the morning. Miller was already awake, reviewing tactical simulations on his tablet. The secure phone barely finished its first ring before he answered. It's happening, General Hayes said without introduction. The Council is requesting immediate assistance. The Drax broke through their inner defensive line yesterday. Miller sat up straight. They're specifically asking for our help. Not just asking, begging. Hayes sounded grimly satisfied. The President has authorized Operation Longshot. Your strike force deploys in 6 hours. The plan Miller had developed was audacious. Earth would send a rapid response force using Council transport technology. A carrier strike group had been preparing for weeks. 5,000 personnel, modified weapons systems, and experimental equipment designed to interface with alien technology. At Andrews Air Force Base, Miller addressed the assembled troops. Men and women from every branch of the military stood at attention, their faces solemn but determined. You represent the first human military force to fight beyond our solar system, Miller told them. The enemy we face has defeated forces far more technologically advanced than our own, but they've never faced humans before. He paused, looking across the rows of faces. The Council thinks our weapons are primitive. Today, we prove that sometimes primitive works when advanced fails. The Council vessel that arrived to transport them was massive, its hull scarred from battle. Trell himself greeted Miller at the airlock, his scales dulled with stress. Colonel Miller, the alien said, his earlier condescension replaced with barely concealed desperation. The Council appreciates Earth's assistance. Miller nodded curtly. My forces are ready. We'll need a full briefing on Drax positions and tactics en route. During the 12-hour journey to the front lines, Miller and his command staff studied everything the Council knew about the Drax. The picture was grim. Council colonies lay in ruins. Their fleet was reduced to less than 40% strength. Their shields absorb and redirect energy, Trell explained, showing holographic battle footage. We've tried every frequency, every power level. Have you attempted any physical weapons? Miller asked. Trell flicked his tail in irritation. We explained before. The Council abandoned such archaic methods generations ago. Then it's time to go back to basics, Miller said. The human forces deployed to a Council station orbiting Proxima Centauri's third planet, the next likely Drax target. Council officers watched with undisguised curiosity as human troops assembled their gear. Many openly laughed when they saw the rifles, machine guns, and missile launchers. They bring hand weapons to a space battle, one alien officer remarked loudly. Miller ignored them, focusing on final preparations. The modified ammunition would work in vacuum. The targeting systems had been calibrated for space combat. It was untested, but it was all they had. They didn't wait long for battle. The Drax arrived 18 hours later. 3 capital ships and a dozen smaller vessels, their black hulls absorbing the light from the nearby sun. The remaining Council ships moved to engage, firing brilliant beams of energy that splashed harmlessly against Drax shields. Return fire cut through 2 Council vessels like paper. Now, Miller ordered. Human ships launched from the station, smaller and more maneuverable than their Council counterparts. As they closed with the nearest Drax vessel, Miller gave the command every human had been waiting for. All units, weapons free. Railguns mounted on the human ships fired, launching metal slugs at incredible speeds. Missiles streaked across the void, their conventional warheads armed and ready. On the command ship, Trell watched the primitive attack with what seemed like pity, until the first impacts. The railgun slugs punched through the Drax shields as if they weren't there. Missiles detonated against the enemy hull, tearing great gashes in the alien metal. The Drax ship listed, venting atmosphere and debris. Silence fell across the Council command center. Trell stared at the display, his reptilian features frozen in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. Miller allowed himself a small smile. "No, just overlooked. Their shields stop energy, not mass." As the battle continued, more human weapons found their marks. For the first time since the invasion began, Drax ships were falling. Trell turned to Miller, seeing him as if for the first time. "Perhaps," the alien said carefully, "we have something to learn from Earth after all." News of the first human victory spread through Council space like wildfire. The station's command center buzzed with activity as Council scientists examined footage of the battle, their earlier dismissiveness replaced with urgent curiosity. Miller stood before a holographic display, pointing out key moments in the engagement to a group of alien officers. The Drax shields are specialized against energy attacks. They create a field that disperses focused energy, lasers, plasma, particle beams, but they have minimal effect on physical objects. Trell moved closer, his scales reflecting the blue light of the hologram. "Our entire defense doctrine, rendered obsolete by such a simple oversight." "Specialization is a double-edged sword," Miller replied. "Your technology advanced in one direction so far that you stopped looking at alternatives." A Council engineer named Lox approached with a human rifle. She had been examining Earth weapons for hours, her four-fingered hands moving delicately over the unfamiliar mechanisms. "The principle is so basic," she marveled. "Chemical energy converted to kinetic force. No targeting computers, no power cells to disrupt." "Sometimes the old ways work best," Miller said. The celebration was short-lived. Intelligence reports indicated the Drax were regrouping, bringing in reinforcements from conquered territories. They might not be familiar with physical weapons, but they were quick learners. Miller called an emergency meeting with his command staff and key Council representatives. "We've surprised them once," he said. "We won't get a second chance. The Drax will adapt their shields or change tactics." Captain Rodriguez, Miller's second-in-command, nodded. "We need to hit them hard before they can respond. Take the fight to them." Trell hissed softly. "Impossible. Even with your projectile weapons, we lack the forces for an offensive operation." Miller studied the star map showing Drax positions. "Then we need to be smarter. A surgical strike at their command structure." The plan that emerged was audacious. Human and Council forces would combine technologies to create something the Drax couldn't anticipate. Council ships would transport a small strike team of human special forces to the Drax flagship. While Council vessels engaged the Drax fleet as a distraction, the humans would board the enemy vessel and disable it from within. The mission was given the name Operation Trojan. 3 days later, Miller stood in the launch bay with the strike team. 20 of Earth's finest soldiers equipped with vacuum-sealed combat suits and modified weapons. Council technicians had helped adapt human firearms for space combat, improving recoil compensation and oxygen-independent firing mechanisms. Commander Walker, leader of the strike team, checked her equipment one last time. "Just like we trained, sir. Get in, plant the packages, get out." Miller nodded. "The Council ships will hold their attention for 30 minutes. That's your window." As the team boarded their transport, Trell approached Miller. The alien's demeanor had changed dramatically since their first meeting on Earth. "Your soldiers," Trell said quietly. "They know the survival probability is low." "They know," Miller confirmed. "Yet they go willingly. For a species they've never met, worlds they've never seen." Miller watched the last team member board the ship. That's what humans do. The battle unfolded according to plan. At first, the Council fleet engaged the Drax ships, drawing their attention while the small transport carrying the human strike team slipped through the chaos. Using technology that masked its energy signature, the transport attached to the Drax flagship near an external access port. From the command center, Miller watched helmet camera feeds as the strike team breached the hull and entered the alien vessel. The interior was dark, with strange organic-looking corridors illuminated by pulsing blue light. Walker's voice came through the comm. We're in. Moving to primary target. The team encountered resistance. Drax warriors in heavy armor. The aliens were tall, with elongated limbs and reflective black carapaces. They carried energy weapons that the humans quickly learned to avoid. But when the humans opened fire with their ballistic weapons, the effect was devastating. The Drax, unaccustomed to projectile weapons, fell before they could adapt. Main engineering located, Walker reported. Setting charges now. On the display, Miller saw Council ships taking heavy damage. Their diversion was working, but time was running short. 10 minutes, Commander, he warned. Then get your team out. Understood. Charges set. Beginning extraction. Miller held his breath as the minutes ticked by. Then the flagship erupted from within, secondary explosions cascading along its length. The tide had turned. The Drax, for the first time, were in retreat. The victory against the Drax flagship changed everything. The Council chamber, once filled with dismissive aliens, now buzzed with urgent requests for human expertise. Miller found himself at the center of a storm, directing not just Earth forces but coordinating with Council military leaders who suddenly valued his primitive tactical knowledge. We need to strike while they're disorganized, Miller told the gathered commanders. The Drax lost their flagship and a significant portion of their command structure. They're vulnerable. Trell, now serving as liaison between human and Council forces, nodded in agreement. The Council fleet is at your disposal, Colonel. What do you propose? Miller gestured to the holographic display showing Drax-controlled systems. We need to arm Council ships with human weapons technology. Can your engineers adapt railgun designs to your vessels? Lox, the Council engineer who had studied human firearms, stepped forward. We've already begun modifications. The principles are simple enough once you abandon certain assumptions. Good, Miller said, but technology alone won't win this war. We need to train Council forces in human combat tactics. The training program began immediately. Human instructors worked with alien soldiers, teaching them concepts that had been forgotten across Council space: redundancy, asymmetric warfare, and above all, adaptability. In a large training hall, Captain Rodriguez demonstrated proper handling of a modified rifle to a group of Council soldiers. The weapon had been adapted for various alien physiologies, but the basic principle remained the same. Don't rely on targeting computers, Rodriguez instructed. They can be jammed or hacked. Learn to aim manually. Trust your instincts. A tall avian alien named Crix struggled with the concept. But accuracy calculations require. Forget calculations, Rodriguez interrupted. Feel the weapon become part of you. Anticipate its behavior. Miller watched from the doorway, remembering his own training decades ago. The aliens were quick learners once they overcame their technological biases. Trell approached, his scales now bearing a ceremonial mark, recognition of his role in the alliance with Earth. Your methods are unorthodox, the reptilian admitted, but effective. The Council shipyards have completed the first batch of hybrid vessels. The new ships combine Council propulsion and life support systems with human-designed weapons. Railguns, missile launchers, and even simple chemical explosives were integrated into vessels that had previously relied solely on energy weapons. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Drax flagship, the counter-offensive began. The combined fleet entered the Therian system, the first territory captured by the Drax. Miller stood on the bridge of the command vessel alongside Council Admiral Zen. The Drax have had time to analyze our first engagement, Miller cautioned. They'll have countermeasures. Admiral Zen, a tall humanoid with silvery skin, nodded, which is why we follow your strategy of variation. No single approach. The battle was joined as Drax ships rose from the occupied planet. As Miller had predicted, they had modified their shields, creating layers that could deflect some physical impacts. But the Council forces were no longer reliant on a single tactic. When railguns proved less effective, they switched to explosive ordnance. When the Drax adapted to that, Human-designed electronic warfare systems disrupted their communications. From the command center, Miller directed the assault with a calm born of experience. Group 2, flank and engage with nuclear-tipped missiles. Group 3, prepare for boarding actions. The Dracs fought fiercely, but without their centralized command structure, they couldn't coordinate effectively against the multifaceted attack. One by one, their ships were disabled or destroyed. On the planet's surface, combined human Council ground forces engaged Drax occupation troops. Council soldiers who had once relied entirely on energy rifles now moved with new confidence, wielding physical weapons and employing human tactics, taking cover, laying suppressive fire, using grenades to flush out entrenched positions. When the system was secured, Admiral Zen turned to Miller, genuine respect in her metallic eyes. 3 months ago, the Council would have laughed at the suggestion that humans had anything to teach us about warfare. Now we owe you our survival. Miller shook his head. Not just human ways. It's the combination that's powerful. Your technology with our adaptability. As reports came in of similar victories across the front, Miller allowed himself to believe, for the first time, that they might actually win this war. Next target, he said, pointing to the star map. The Drax manufacturing hub at Vega Prime. Let's show them what humans and the Council can do together. 1 year after the first human forces engaged the Drax, Miller stood at the observation deck of the Council's rebuilt headquarters. The massive space station orbited a pristine blue-green world that reminded him of Earth. Through the viewport, ships of various designs moved in coordinated patterns, Council vessels now bristling with both energy and projectile weapons. "Hard to believe it's finally over," said Admiral Zen, joining him at the window. Miller nodded. The last Drax stronghold surrendered yesterday. Their leadership has accepted the terms. The war had changed everything. What began as a desperate alliance had evolved into something more profound. A complete restructuring of galactic defense philosophy. The Council, once arrogant in its technological superiority, had learned the painful lesson that progress in one direction often meant vulnerability in another. "The formal ceremony begins in an hour," Zen reminded him. "The entire Council will be present." Miller straightened his uniform. After a year in space, wearing the formal dress blues felt strange. "I'm still not comfortable with all this ceremony." "You ended a war that nearly destroyed us," Zen said simply. "Ceremony is the least we can offer." The Council chamber was filled beyond capacity. Representatives from all 23 member species were present, along with human diplomats and military officers. At the center stood the Council's ruling body, including Nax and Trell. As Miller entered, a hush fell over the crowd. He walked steadily to the center of the chamber, aware of thousands of alien eyes following his movement. Nax stepped forward, his blue skin now marked with the elaborate patterns that denoted his elevated status. "Colonel James Miller of Earth, the Council has convened to formally recognize humanity's contribution to galactic security." The formal language couldn't hide the emotion in the alien's voice. When the Drax threatened our existence, the Council faced not just military defeat, but cultural extinction. Our over-specialization, our certainty in our own advancement, nearly destroyed us. Trell moved to stand beside Nax. "Humanity showed us that true advancement comes not from abandoning old ways, but from integrating them with the new. The projectile weapons we once mocked saved countless lives. The tactics we dismissed as primitive proved decisive." A holographic display activated, showing the new class of vessels that combined human and Council technology. They were called Miller-class ships, a fact that still embarrassed the Colonel. Beyond technology, Nax continued, humans brought a perspective the Council had forgotten. Adaptability, resourcefulness, a willingness to embrace multiple solutions rather than seeking a single perfect answer. The official part came next. Earth was formally granted full membership in the Galactic Council, not as a junior partner, but with equal standing to the founding species. Miller was appointed as the first human to serve on the Council's Defense Committee, a position he had initially tried to decline. "I'm a soldier, not a politician," he had protested. "Which is precisely why we need you," Trell had countered. After the ceremony, Miller found himself surrounded by council officials eager to speak with him. He answered their questions patiently, but his attention was drawn to a group of human and alien soldiers talking animatedly in a corner. A young council officer was proudly showing off a modified pistol to some human Marines. Nearby, human instructors demonstrated hand-to-hand combat techniques to interested aliens. The barriers that had once seemed insurmountable were falling away. Later, in a quiet moment, Trell approached Miller with 2 glasses of a blue liquid. "A toast, Colonel. It's non-toxic to humans," I checked. Miller accepted the drink. "What shall we toast to?" Trell considered. "To learning new tricks. To the wisdom of not dismissing the unfamiliar." "How about to guns?" Miller suggested with a slight smile. "The ones you laughed at." The reptilian made that clicking sound that Miller now recognized as laughter. "To human guns, then. And to being proven gloriously wrong." As they drank, Miller gazed out at the stars visible through the chamber's dome. Humanity had taken its first real steps into a much larger universe. They had earned their place not through technological superiority, but through the uniquely human ability to innovate when backed into a corner. "What comes next for you, Colonel?" Trell asked. Miller watched as a new ship class launched from the station's dock. Sleek council design merged with robust human engineering. "We build something new," he said simply. "Something better than either of us could create alone. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity."